All right, good afternoon, everyone. First of all, thank you very much for attending my seminar. This will be 20 minutes long. Like I say, if anyone's got any questions during the seminar, we'll save all of them for the end. And yeah, just thanks for coming. So for PTs, this would be ideal if you guys are looking to train anyone in Olympic lifting. And then, of course, we've got some of you guys from sales. So for you guys, if you ever come across a PT with Olympic lifting, then of course, guys, you can also learn something from there and you know what to expect as well. All right. So like I say, here's the seminar. This is what we're doing. Olympic weightlifting for clients. How to get the most from training clients in Olympic weightlifting safely and effectively. All right. So a definition, just in case you're not sure what we're actually on about here. So this is actually a good Google definition here of what Olympic weightlifting is. If you're wondering who the hell that is Liu Xiaojun of Team China, one of the most decorated weightlifters of all time, doing both the Olympic snatch and clean and jerk there through the mid-pull. So here is our definition. So weightlifting of a type performed as a competitive event at the Olympic Games. The lifts involved are the snatch and clean and jerk. Workout routines include endurance training for races and Olympic lifting, a 2-hour Olympic lifting class, for example, which is what you'll see in your class or your CrossFit gyms, that sort of thing. All right, so that's just an idea of what it is, guys. So then if we move on, please. So to define the snatch, which is the first lift you'll do, especially if you are if you're at a competition, the snatch will be the first lift you perform, which you can sort of see happening in the background there. Shame that faded out a little bit because you can actually see the full thing, but never mind. Again, just to kind of go through the definition there. So the snatch is one of the 2 competition lifts in the Olympic weightlifting. In this lift, the athlete must take the bar from the ground into an overhead position in one movement. Okay, so just to compare that to the clean and jerk, like we'll see in a minute, the snatch, we must go straight overhead, whereas the clean and jerk is actually comprised of 2 movements. The snatch is always attempted first in weightlifting, like I was just saying, and the objective of the snatch is to lift the barbell from the ground to overhead in one continuous motion, as we just established. All right, cool. And then of course we have the clean and jerk, which is a little bit different. So the clean and jerk is a combination lift, as in, like we're saying, 2 different lifts. So we have the clean and the jerk, in which the weight is taken from the ground to the front of the shoulders, what we call a front rack position. So it's essentially we're taking a bar from the ground to here. This is the front rack. And then from the shoulders to overhead, the jerk. The sport formerly included a third lift event known as the clean and press, which we'll be more familiar with in our class settings. Okay. Something I'll add to that is actually 3 forms of jerk that you can do. One of them is a split jerk. So just to kind of do a rubbish demonstration of that, that's the typical one you see where the split comes forward. The Chinese Olympic lifter, so that Liu Xiaojun that we just saw on here, he will do a squat jerk where he comes under. And then the other one is a push jerk, which is similar, but you don't go quite so low. So there's actually 3 ways you can perform that last lift as well. And that all depends on the client that you're working with there. All right, and yeah, so that's your clean and jerk, guys. Cool. So who is it best suited to? So I've put it into 5 categories. The first one is obviously a bit obvious. Yeah, Olympic lifters, of course. If you want to do Olympic lifting as a sport, of course, that is the workouts you're going to do. CrossFit athletes. So CrossFit, some of you will be familiar with CrossFit. It combines gymnastics, conditioning, and Olympic weightlifting. So a lot of CrossFit gyms will cover a lot of Olympic lifters, and this is where I've worked. So a lot of my experience working with these kind of clients. This is where I've worked before. Sport-specific athletes. So we've seen like in rugby, NFL, these kinds of sports. So a lot of these coaches will include that in their weightlifting programs. Okay, younger athletes. So clients between 18 and 25. So this is a bit of an interesting one. Reason being, just because they're younger, they're generally more mobile. So when it comes to being flexible enough to hold in a squat or overhead, we typically find these will favour the Olympic lift more than, let's say, a 40-year-old who works in, let's say, like an office. Obviously, they're very tight, and when you're very tight, it does make the Olympic lifts very difficult to achieve. And then this last one, so I've left a star on this one. So this one is actually the one that we will relate to, and this is where I've taken a couple of clients on here, long-standing clients that are looking for a new challenge. So just an example for the PTs, if you've had a client for several plus years, you feel like you've gone through everything you can with them, and they feel like they need that new challenge, this is a really good one for them. And for example, my client Mandy, we do Olympic lifting with her because she's at that point where she needs that new challenge. All right, so there's your different kind of client types that you may involve into Olympic lifting. All right, thank you, Max. Yeah, cool. And then of course, where do we start? All right, so again, this is more for the PTs now. So as PTs, where do we start with Olympic lifting? Well, like any client, obviously we need to establish a goal. So we need to understand the goal and the motive behind it. So for example, do they actually want to compete in weightlifting, or is it just for the sake of doing it for some fun? And depending on what that goal is, will change the way you coach them. So for example, if they're looking to compete, you're going to get very technical. You're going to be very hard with them and make sure that they're lifting correctly and for the longevity. If it's for fun, you still coach. You still want to make sure that you're hitting all the criteria with the lifts, but you maybe wouldn't be so hard when it comes to the correcting and those kinds of things, as long as the safety is there, right? So it's just a little bit of understanding first. And then set the expectations with your client. So, of course, Olympic lifting is very tough, like any sport, like if you were playing basketball, anything that's going to involve any kind of technical components. The reality is, and especially if it's going to be for long-standing clients that are of older age, it takes a long time to accomplish it. Yeah, it's very difficult. For example, Mandy, who I work with, we started about 9-10 months ago. And we're only just about adding weights to the bar with her lifts. Yeah, like literally just 5 kilo plates. Yeah, so it takes a long time. So that's the important thing as well. Just make them understand we're not teaching bicep curls. These are very technical, hard lifts to achieve. And then, of course, once we've established that goal, we need to, again, just like any client really, we need to perform necessary assessment methods to ensure adequate mobility requirements. So like I was saying before, you need to be very flexible to do the Olympic lifts, lots of squatting. It's a lot of positions that you wouldn't normally get into. So therefore, we have to then perform a screening, which is what will be the next slide. So that will show you how this works. Just about fitted in the screen. So there's a lot of, again, so this is more for PTs. So yeah, so for you guys, this will be quite familiar. So we need to perform some screening tests. Screening test basically means just testing for someone's range of motion at different joints. There's about 100 different tests you can do. I've picked the top 5 here. So the top 5 for Olympic lifting will be the 6-inch wall test, the Thomas test, the shoulder flexion against wall test, thoracic extension test against a wall, which are very similar, and then an overhead squat. Is it possible so we can get rid of that little coach thing so we can actually see that picture? Does it let you exit at all? No, it's fine. All I'd say is basically behind here, that picture is just someone holding that broom that we have and just performing an overhead squat, which is essentially combining all the tests that we have here, okay? So for example, so for the first one, this would be the most important one here, 6-inch wall test, which is this, okay? So as you can see there, client's got his foot about 6 inches behind the wall. He's in a lunge position, and he's basically just seeing, can he get his knee to the wall? And that will be the most critical one, because if a client cannot do this, essentially they can't sit into a full squat like I'm demonstrating there. And if they can't do that, then of course they're not going to be able to do the lifts as it is with the squat cleans and the overhead squats. Okay, so if they do fail a test, it's not a bad thing. It just means that you won't do any squat movements. For example, for a power clean, it means, for a clean, you would just teach to a half squat, for example. All right, so you just have to modify things. So anyway, so that would be the most important. Then we're looking at the Thomas test. So just to kind of make clear what's going on here. So when this guy's putting his leg back, this trading leg here should be flat. Yeah, it should be low. So this one is actually a foul test at the minute because his knee's lifting up. So that would just suggest that he's a bit tight in his hip flexors, which again, when it comes to a squat, it just means he's going to be a bit compromised and sitting in the bottom position. So again, you just need to address that as a client. And then we're going to go into the overhead ones here. So these are 2 similar ones. This one is for shoulders. So this is actually a very good test because she's got her arms dead straight. So someone, if they're working in an office, if they did that test, you'd probably see them more in this position. So then when it comes to doing overhead, they simply can't get their arms straight without some sort of compensation through the back or hips, right? So again, so if they did end up in that position, you would need to address that before you get them doing any kind of presses. And it's essentially the same with the 4th and 5th one that we can't see there, right? So we've got the thoracic one, same thing. All we're trying to look for there is, can she get her arms back without her arms coming forward? Yeah, so again, they can get their arms overhead. And then the overhead squat, which we cannot see, is one where we combine all of them and we essentially just look at every component together there, all right? And so they're your top 5 screening tests. Cool. And then what do we do with those results? So there's 2 things. The first I actually already mentioned, we need to modify the way we train the client. So again, for example, if they've failed the 6-inch wall test, we cannot get them into a low squat, because the problem is if they do, they're not going to be able to keep their feet flat, or they will, but they'll do it by compensating and bending their lower back. I won't be able to obviously show you guys, but yeah, it compromises the safety of the lift. So that's the first thing. You need to modify the way you do the lifts. And then the second thing is we obviously need to set up a mobility program that will address those issues, okay? Which they'll do daily for about 10 minutes, which actually goes on to the next slide. So yeah, Max, when you're ready, please. Cool. All right, so here's just an example plan, guys, of what we would do. So let's say, so if someone did foul the ankle and hips, right, so they can't get their knee to the wall. Yeah, they're doing the Thomas test, the trailing legs coming up. This is just an example program. So you would give them about 5 different exercises. And I would do each one of these for 2 to 3 minutes. So we're only saying 10 to 15 minutes a day to work on these tight areas, all right? And these are just example exercises or like foam roll techniques that we can do. So ankle smash and floss with a foam roller, that's basically just foam rolling with the ankle. So you just place a foam roller under the ankle, you're sitting back, and you're just kind of moving your foot up and down to kind of undo some of those knots in the calf area. Plated squat hold. So again, imagine I've got a plate, just sitting at the bottom and then shifting from left to right. Yeah, so getting them used to sitting in that squat position. Supine squat hold with a band. Okay, couch stretch and box assisted pigeon pose, which are basically just different kind of hip mobility drills that we would try and get the clients to do every day for 10 to 15 minutes. Yeah, if they're only doing this twice a week, it doesn't really progress them quick enough, especially if they're looking to compete in things. You want to address this and get them doing this quite soon. Okay, so yeah, so there's an example of a mobility plan that you would give to your client. All right, so now we go into top 5 common faults that you'll see with new clients when performing their lifts. Okay, so now we're actually talking about the lifts themselves and the mistakes you'll see when they're performing. Okay, so again, these are the top 5 that I'll see in the clients that I teach. So the first one is getting into the correct start-up position, right? Accelerating too fast from the floor, early pulling of the arms before the hips are fully extended, failure to keep the bar close to the body, and finally using the shoulders when performing the overhead lifts. Okay, so we're actually going to go into them now. This is where you're going to see me. So this was me yesterday and today, doing some lovely, beautiful photos there. So set up position. So I've given you 2 incorrect ones, or 1 correct one. Star means correct, cross obviously means wrong. So actually this one doesn't look too bad. So the problem with this one, okay, my weight is too far forward. So my knees there shouldn't be passing past my arms. Okay, weight should be more in my heels. So again, not great because it's actually quite small from where you are, but actually my heels are very slightly coming off the floor there. Okay, and that's no good. We want to be flat feet, so a tripod foot. Yeah, so we're distributing the weight evenly. This one's a bit more of an obvious one. My hips are a bit too high up in the air, and my head's looking down. So actually, for a conventional deadlift or like a Romanian deadlift, this is actually not too bad. But for the Olympic lifts, it's a little bit of a lower position. So ideally, this is kind of what we're looking for here, a lower position, but my weight is evenly distributed. It's actually not the best setup position for myself there. I still should be lifting my head up a little bit higher, but yeah, we can't all win. Yeah. Okay, and then this is the next one. So quite hard to see again. So accelerating too fast from the floor. So what happens when you accelerate too fast from the floor? Again, not really the best kind of example, but I'm almost trying to imagine I'm kind of rounding off there. When you accelerate too fast, you end up like losing that start position that you got yourself in. So ideally, if you're slow enough off the floor, you keep this nice straight back and this strong position like I've got in the second photo. Okay, yeah, moving on. This is a really common one. In fact, so Mandy, who I work with, who I've already mentioned, she does this one probably more than any other one. Early pulling of the arms before the hips have fully extended. So you can see here, even though I'm still in a slight hinge position, my arms are already bending. So the idea is when we're doing the when we're lifting the bar, and the way I teach it, I always say hips, shrug, elbows, and catch. All right, and that's essentially what we're looking for there. Yeah. So here, of course, we're bending the arms early, where this is the position we should be in, really, really tall on the toes, okay, and then keeping that bar close, all right? So this is one, like I say, we see quite commonly. Yeah, there's 2 more. And again, another quite common one, not keeping the bar close to the body. So as you can see here, I've got the bar quite fully out. Yeah, quite exaggerated. Most people obviously won't do it this badly, but again, so the bar, not only should it be close, it should literally be in contact with the legs. Yeah, so in this one here, I can actually sense that bar against my legs. Yeah, the reason this is a problem, if that was a weighted bar for somebody, that bar in front will end up making their body shift forward, and because they're shifting forward, once again you then come back to one of the other issues where your heels are lifting, and essentially all power is lost, right? It's also quite dangerous for the spine, so when the bar is pulling us forward, normally would find some compensation through the back. All right, so not only is it not technically correct, But this is also quite a big safety problem when it comes to lifting. Yeah, so bar has to stay really close to the body. Cool, and then the last one. So again, it's quite hard to demonstrate these as a photo. It's a lot easier to demonstrate if I did a video. So yeah, maybe next time that would have been a bit better. But anyway, using the shoulders when performing the overhead movement. So when you do, let's say a push jerk, for example, we shouldn't actually press the bar. Yeah, in all the different lifts, you've got push jerk, split jerk, squat jerk. There's no point in that in that phrase where it's actually saying press, right? So when you're going overhead, everything should actually come from the legs. So what I've tried to demonstrate here is, as I'm pushing the bar up, you can tell I'm pressing the bar because it should be sitting on my shoulders here, okay? Compared to this one where you can see as I'm driving up, the bar actually remains on top of my shoulders, all right? And it's very simple, right? The reason that's an issue, your legs are 10 times, well, not 10 times, but let's say a lot stronger than your shoulders, right? So the idea is we don't want to use these muscles. We're going to be a lot more efficient and stronger using these kind of muscles here. Okay, so again, that's another one you'll see in the jerk. People will press the bar rather than use their legs. All right, and that's your most common mistakes. All right, next slide is strength exercises that will help your clients improve their Olympic lifts. Okay, and there's quite a lot of exercises. Of course, with the Olympic lifts, you'll use pretty much every muscle group in the body to perform both the lifts. But there's specific exercises that will definitely help us more than others. And I've put that into, again, like five different categories here. So the first one, and again, I've tried to do this in an order of most important to least important. So the most important, in my personal opinion, this is not as a general, just my opinion, plyometric exercises. So I've given you some examples there: box jumps, broad jumps, and controlled squat jumps as well, which is, as it sounds, yeah, jumping on boxes. Broad jumps is jumping forward. And the reason why I've selected those as your most important is because you're trying to train the body to be more explosive, right? Essentially, when you're doing a clean, so let's just, you can imagine the clean, it's no different to performing a jump. Yeah, it's essentially the same movement pattern and using those same fast twitch fibers. Yeah, so if you are working with clients, or if you are a client, hopefully you would add some of them sort of exercises in your routine to improve your lifts. The second is your squats, quite an obvious one. Of course, when you're doing your Olympic lifts, you're going to be moving through a front squat, and in the snatch, you're going to move through an overhead squat. So it just makes perfect sense to train those. Yeah, so we can perform all sorts of squats: back squats, box squats, front squats, and overhead squats. And in fact, the last two there would be the most important because you're quite literally mimicking a part of those two lifts there. Okay, and you would do those heavy guys, of course, right? Because the Olympic lift will only be once. So you would do reps of 2 to 3 for about 5 to 6 sets, something like that. Yeah, so heavy forms of squats. Anti-extension exercises. So this, some of you might not understand what that quite is. Anti-extension is any exercise that's stopping me from extension. So this is extension. So a really easy example would be a plank. So when you plank, we're essentially trying to stop this happening to our back. But of course, you can get quite in depth with that. So examples I've given you here: TRX, TRX fallouts, plank reaches, ab wheel rollouts, where you're on the wheel rolling out is really popular, and barbell rollouts as well. Okay. Again, reason being, when you're doing your Olympic lifts, what we don't want to do is end up getting into any kind of extension. So just to give you an example, another fault, which I didn't put on the top 5, you can end up getting into this position, right? So you see I'm like really arching here. We want to train these muscles here in the abs and all the muscles of the core to essentially stop that, right? So we definitely want to include stuff there. And then pull exercises. So this is really important because essentially you're using a lot of pull strength during the lifts, right? So for example, from the floor, even though I'm using my legs, you're using a lot of your lat muscles to essentially keep the bar close. So if you remember one of the faults we talked about, where we're talking about keeping the bar close to the body, right? That comes from the lats and the shoulders. Okay, so any kind of exercises like bent over rows, pull-ups, face pulls, and straight arm pull downs. The straight arm pull down, which is essentially this exercise, right, which you do with a band or cable, is a really good one to mimic that idea of keeping your bar close. All right, so if I was going to rate any of those as from 1 to 4, that would be my number 1 there. And then lastly, overhead stability exercises, and these are quite fun as well. These are exercises that you would normally do only if you're working with Olympic lifters and the like. So essentially, we're talking about such as overhead carries, bottoms up carries, banded squats with weighted attachments or a PVC pipe. Yeah, so we can get like kettlebells, we can hold it overhead, go for a walk. Yeah, like literally just walk with a dumbbell or kettlebell, right? And it's essentially, so the reason we're training those when we're going overhead, right, we're stable over the head there. We're not too wobbly. Yeah, someone who's a little bit unstable in their shoulders, yeah, they might be fine getting the weight overhead, but then when they're holding it there, they're having issues. Yeah, so that's when you start training those overhead positions. All right, so yeah, there's some exercises for you to train. Okay, and lastly, pros and cons to pros and cons to training clients in Olympic lifting. This is the last slide, guys, so if you are losing me, don't worry, we're nearly there. So the pros, so they are, it's enjoyable and addictive, which can help retention of clients. So again, this is coming back to the PTs now. Yeah, Mandy, if it weren't for Olympic lifting, I probably wouldn't have her as a client anymore, but because we found this kind of way of making sessions fun, yeah, she's now one of my long-standing clients. It's a never-ending process of learning. Therefore, you can teach this for long periods with clients. So again, I have to use Mandy because she's not my only client at the minute, so you're going to keep hearing that name. Yeah, like I said at the very start of the seminar, we're a year into Olympic lifting, and yet we're just about starting to use weights, right? So because it's a long process, it will keep them, again, coming back, so it will help that retention. It's fun for you, the personal trainer, as it challenges you to use well-trained eye for good technique. So it challenges you as a coach because now you're having to get really technical. And also it allows you to get involved as well. You can demonstrate and it challenges you as a PT to demonstrate and get involved. Okay. And of course there is cons as well, right? And actually I did experience this with another client. So as good as Mandy has been as a long-standing client and enjoying it, I've also had another client who I trained here where it actually went the other way. So cons are, it can be very challenging and too overwhelming for some clients. So again, because it's a challenging lift, for some people it can be too overwhelming, and therefore they don't like it, and it doesn't last very long before they're going back to your regular exercises. And of course, we can't ignore the risk of injury. So risk for injury is greater than your conventional lifts in the gym. Yeah, essentially we're lifting bars from the floor, going overhead. Lower back is at risk, knees for the squats. Yeah, there's all sort of different issues that can come up there. So again, that just means as a coach, you have to be really well trained in actually making sure your clients are lifting well. And then the client themselves, right? They have to make sure that they stick to the process, not go too heavy, and listen to the coach as well. Yeah, make sure you're taking on board what they're saying with your technique. And then lastly, it doesn't suit most clients' fitness goals and will most likely, again, I can't remember what I've wrote there, but it's covered me up. But that's fine anyway. So again, the problem is not really a problem, but obviously, as we know, most of our clientele as PTs are going to be wanting to lose weight or gain strength. So the only issue is with it is that, yeah, they might find it doesn't really have any benefit to achieving what their goals are. So there's some pros and cons for you guys as well. Does anyone know how long it's been, by the way? Sorry, just randomly. I was going to start a timer. We are there. Perfect. So next slide, please, which means we are there. Guys, thank you for coming. I hope you took something from that. Any questions, please ask me now. My favourite lift? So mine would probably be the split jerk. Why? Good question. No real reason. I really enjoy it, prefer it, yeah. And it is one I'm pretty good at, so because I've gotten good at it, it makes it, as in with my split jerk, 105 kilos. So yeah, which is same as my clean. Quite rare for most people to do it the same. Yeah, so there you go. Cool. Yeah, thank you. Anybody else? No? In which case, guys, thank you very much for coming. Hope you enjoyed that, and I'll see you very soon. Cheers. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.